And get started. Greg, welcome. Really great to have you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sean. Good to be with you. Good to be with the SSA, a group that I've been associated with for a really long time. Before I say anything about that, I'll just say I recognize that some of the leadership of the group these days is in the LA area, and if I'm not mistaken, your executive director was impacted by the fires himself, was he not? Yeah. So just want to send him my thoughts. I don't think he's joining us today, but Kevin, wherever you are, my heart goes out to you and your family. My best friend of decades lost his home in the fires a few weeks ago now, and my life has been kind of uh, other things that I would have been doing during this time have been preempted to be dealing with that. So just, for anybody that's out there, it's tough times. It's apocalyptic times, and apocalyptic times, which we'll spend some time discussing this hour, secular apocalyptic times. And I'm thinking of you. So also SSA, I go back in my involvement with the organization to 2006. I became friends at that point with August Brunsman, the founding executive director, and served as advisory board chair. At that time, at least a meaningless title, if there ever was one, but it had the distinction of meaning that I was the advisory chair of a advisory board that, at least in name, included people like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens while he was still alive, and many others. So it was a real honor and a pleasure to do it. At times we got into some pretty heated debates, so I guess that was less of a pleasure, but interesting debates. So there's pleasure in that too. Um, and just really appreciate people who take the time in their lives to make this part of their identity, to make it part of their community, your activism, your exploration of who you are and how you want to live. It's a gift to a broader community that you give by being present at something like this, and giving your ideas and your heart and a piece of who you are. And I just really admire the people that tend to gather around this, and hopefully can offer some words from my new work that you'll find useful, provocative, depressing, inspiring, a little bit of all or both. Yeah. So Tech Agnostic is the name of this new book. My first since I wrote Good Without God, What a Billion Non-Religious People Do Believe, which came out in 2009, 2010. And this book is in some ways very much a sequel to that book, and in other ways, a huge departure from that book. It's pretty obvious to SSA folks, I would think, why I would have written the first one. But let me tell you a little bit about why I wrote this second one. So the full title, of course, is Tech Agnostic: How Technology Became the World's Most Powerful Religion and Why It Desperately Needs a Reformation. And as I say on page, I don't know, 6 or 7 of the book, am I literally saying that technology has overtaken religion, traditional religion, as the world's most powerful influence on our minds, our hearts, our lives today? Or is this book the most elaborate, extended metaphor, most elaborate and annoying extended metaphor you'll ever hear in your entire life? And the answer to that question is yes. Um, so, uh, the story of why I wrote it is very much related to organizations like this. Good Without God is an introduction to humanism. Essentially, it's an introduction to what I would consider to be the positive values and even communities that non-religious people espouse, devote ourselves to, build, etc. And it's meant to take readers on a thousands of years long journey, not just in the West, as is popularly understood. A lot of introductions to humanism, secularism, etc., begin in Europe, whether it's with the Enlightenment or even going back to Greco-Roman thought. And I do cover much of that in Good Without God in brief form. It's meant to be a popular introduction, not an encyclopedia. But I was really careful to and inspired to show readers at that time that it goes back in what you call the East and the West, that there are origins of humanism, secularism, sort of ethical, community-oriented, meaningful secularism in all of the world's traditions and places, and all genders, all people tend to think secularishly or humanistically, if you give us enough of a chance to do so. But it was a small minority of individuals and small groups through much of history that in the past century has increasingly blossomed into something much bigger. But the book ends with a solid 50, 60 pages devoted to the idea of building community for humanists, atheists, agnostics, and the non-religious, showing that that there is not just an ethic to humanism and secularism, but that you can bring people together and have them form a genuine sense of community around these ideals and values. And I did a lot of research about that, and ultimately at the end of the book writing process decided that, unlike some of the folks that I was talking to on the SSA board, who their involvement with secularism and humanism was, I'll call it, sort of being a talking head. I wanted to express my interest in these things a little differently. I wanted to really build community, build a congregation. And so I spent about a decade where the center of my work was building a alternative congregation to the traditional congregation. Not, people would say, Greg, is this a church without God? And I'd say, no, not really, because that would imply that it's only for people of Christian cultural background. And so, no, but if you're asking, is it a synagogue, church, mosque, temple, etc., without a God, then yeah, maybe. That's one way to look at it. And really dove into that work, raising money for it, getting involved in all sorts of partnerships with it, including with a lot of SSA folks, raising literally millions of dollars, spending millions of dollars. That shit, community building, is expensive. For leases and staffing and programming, and we brought in lots of celebrities, and I mean it was quite the time. And I'll try to leave some time that you can ask me about that if you want. There's some doozies as far as stories go. But in any case, after about a decade of doing that work, it began to occur to me that maybe this wasn't the thing that I wanted to devote the rest of my life to. I started when I was quite young. I've been a Harvard chaplain now for over 20 years, an MIT chaplain as well for the last 6 or 7. And, I was sort of ending my 30s, getting into my 40s. and wondering like, is this going to be sustainable for me? The congregation was pretty popular. We often had to turn people away for lack of space or make them line up downstairs to get in. We brought in money from thousands of people, you know, but um, it was hard work. I was working like maybe 80 hours a week to do all of that and started thinking like, can I continue to do this? The catalyst for that, I guess, was my son's birth in 2016. I was taking time to try to finish a book at that point, a book that never saw the light of day, a book about humanist and secular congregations that never quite saw the light of day because in some ways I had a change of heart about whether I really wanted to spend my time touring around talking about that. Um, and uh, and I was getting ready for my son's birth, not having enough time to do like the 40 hours a week of fundraising that I had done, in the years leading up to that. And I just found myself wondering, like, what is it about this idea of community building that's not feeling quite right to me as it used to? And I thought about the idea that I had been taught about religion, which is that it was taught to me as the most powerful social technology ever created. That's pretty much if not a direct quote, then a close paraphrase for how I was taught about religion as a religion major at the University of Michigan in the 90s and on through a lot of grad school in the early 2000s. And I thought about what we had been doing in our congregation building for humanists and atheists and agnostics and allies about bringing the world closer together in a secular way. But that the bringing the world closer together is not my phrase; it's Mark Zuckerberg's phrase. That's a phrase that he coined, echoing a lot of the language that I had learned at Harvard Divinity School. In his 2017 restatement of Facebook, now Meta's mission statement. And around 2017 into 2018, I had a lot of thinking to do about whether I wanted to keep going with that work. And I started thinking about how maybe religion had been the most powerful social technology ever created, but maybe it wasn't necessarily going to remain that way. By that point, we'd had social media for about a decade or more. And I don't know about you. I don't know where you were at that point. Maybe you were in elementary school or whatever. Maybe you weren't born yet, depending on who's on this call. But I began to think about how my own life had been reshaped by those technologies. I arrived at Harvard as a young chaplain the first year that Mark Zuckerberg had gone out to Silicon Valley to do that job full time, had left behind the Harvard dormitory in which he created the tech. And I actually met those first couple years with a lot of the people who were involved in creating it and who went on to help shape it, and other related technologies. And they had changed our world. And they had importantly changed the way that people like me, professional community builders, thought about what it means to build community. The ways in which we were going about interacting with one another online had completely shifted what it meant to build a community. Then I started thinking like, oh, well, all right, that's a parallel between social media tech and community or the congregation, which I had always believed was maybe the most important invention religion had to offer. And then I started thinking, well, are there other parallels between what you call Silicon Valley tech and religion? And I started making a list. I pulled out my copy of a book that I was really excited to be reading at that time, which is this book, Winners Take All by Anand Giridharadas, a humanist secularist, among other things, who's writing about equity and economic and social justice. And I start sketching in the back of that book my list of parallels between religion and tech. And it's a list that I have never stopped making in almost going to be 7 years soon. I mean, to this day, if you follow me on Blue Sky or maybe occasionally on LinkedIn, I'll post new parallels that are coming to my mind because it just never stops. You've got a Peter Thiel, the gay Republican tech venture capitalist multi-billionaire who helped to get Donald Trump elected, and who was the mentor figure for JD Vance, our wonderful vice president. Being sarcastic, don't take me literally on that. And so Peter Thiel recently wrote an op-ed for the Financial Times, which a lot of writers said was incoherent. But to me, it was quite coherent. He starts out by saying quite literally that what the times that we're in are an apocalypse time, and that Donald Trump is the herald, the sort of archangel of his apocalypse. And he even uses the Greek spelling just to emphasize it a little bit more, like in case you missed that he wants you to think biblically about this. There is so much dialogue about AI now as a god that it's not just that I could tell you some stories from this book about people literally worshiping AI as a god. It's not just that I could tell you stories about not just people, but tech centimillionaires, people who've made more than $100 million in their careers in tech, literally worshiping tech as a god, filing the paperwork with the United States government to formally declare their worship of AI as a new religion. It's not just that. It's also, there's a couple of scholars at Princeton, Sayesh Kapoor and Arvind Narayanan, who some of the world's leading scholars of AI, who had a new book that was out just before my book Tech Agnostic came out. So my book came out in October of this past year. There's September. Their book, Princeton University Press, it's called AI Snake Oil, and it's a very good book. It's about sort of what AI can and can't do. But they led off publishing their book with a popular Substack newsletter, also called AI Snake Oil. And one of the articles that came out right around their book coming out to sort of introduce the book was headlined as follows. Said, and I'm paraphrasing almost exactly, I might be quoting here, is AI companies are pivoting from building God to creating products. Good. And, I think that's pretty good. That'd be a good thing to do, to pivot in such a way. But, we hear skeptical secular people like biblical criticism, right? And we like reading between the lines of texts and, not just taking them literally. And so let's do that for a second and presume that if perhaps the world's leading or most influential industry today needs to pivot from building God, then there's got to be a whole lot of God building going on, doesn't there? And that is, in fact, what a lot of the leading figures, the leading billionaires and multi-billionaires of the AI era believe that they are doing. They believe that they are building what is, for all intents and purposes, a new divinity. And I'll quote somebody on Blue Sky named Emily St. James, a writer, journalist, writes for the show Yellow Jackets, among other things, skeeted yesterday, the alliance of Christian nationalists and tech fascists makes sense when you realize both groups are waiting for God to return. The former in a literal sense, the latter via an artificial general intelligence. And then she writes, at least the Christian nationalists are honest about their apocalyptic fervor. Um, and I thought about that as it came out yesterday, and I thought, well, that tweet is, or that skeet, sorry, is targeted quite nicely to my SSA audience. Skeeted back to her, yes, AI messianism is remarkably similar to traditional messianism. I spent several years writing a book on recent on related issues, and indeed, in each chapter of this book, I draw a close parallel between aspects of traditional religion and aspects of a single aspect of traditional religion and a single aspect of what you call Silicon Valley tech. And the the focus in the first section of the book is on beliefs. The second section is on practices, because I've always believed that religion is more than just what people believe. It's also what they do. And that can be a further damning thing about religion if you're inclined to damn religion, as I think all of us are from time to time. But it can also be a redeeming quality at times about religion for those of us who are inclined to see, as I certainly am, and I think any number of us, could or should be at times in our lives inclined to see a mixed bag when we look at religion, something with its strengths and its weaknesses, its challenges, and also its opportunities for humanity. So beliefs, practices, and then finally a reformation, meaning this book that I've written is not an anti technology book. I'm not saying in it like, oh, and then all of us, including humanists and secular people like us, in addition to, anybody else, like we should just all go back to, gathering around fire in a stone ring or, sailing the Atlantic on a wooden board or whatever. No, tech has an important place in the world and in our lives, but it desperately needs a reformation. And we can talk about that a bit, but yeah, that's where I think we can land for now. I'm really interested in talking to many of you about this topic from whatever perspective you're coming from. But the idea is the theology and the doctrine of tech today, from AI worship to the idea of chosenness. In the biblical tradition, you've got your people, the Hebrew people, the Christian people, chosen to do God's will in this special way. In the tech religion, chosenness is sort of secular, technological, scientific genius. There's parallels in religious colonialism and tech colonialism, which is a very real phenomenon. Religious charity or tech philanthropy. And I could go on and on. Then there are the hierarchies in tech, not necessarily the caste system as in Hindu religious tradition. I thought about, is the tech religion, what I'm calling the tech religion, an actual caste system, and that felt a little too much to try to argue. I don't think think that would be nice sensationalistic headline, but I don't think that's actually true. But certainly there are strong hierarchies, like in traditional Judaism, Orthodox Judaism. Not that I need to introduce SSA audiences to the fact that religion has hierarchies, right? I don't, because I talked to one leading humanist as I'm writing the book, who said, "Oh yeah, religion has hierarchies. Tech doesn't have hierarchies." And I had to laugh a little bit. Yes, religion has hierarchies, like the Orthodox Jewish men who wake up every morning, and one of the very, very first things they're supposed to do just as they get out of bed is to say a set of prayers, including thanking God for not making them a woman, right? That kind of hierarchy. But Silicon Valley tech can be extraordinarily hierarchical, as you can see, uh, for example, in, who has the power, right? It's a lot of white male CEOs or white male adjacent CEOs who, more often than not, seem to look like me. I mean, even Elon Musk would probably look like me if he hadn't had hair transplants and probably a jaw transplant too. He couldn't be seen looking like this, so he had to get that work done. But more often than not, people who look like me, and those people, I would say, are as hierarchical as any group on earth. Tech has ritual for sure. How many times a day do you genuflect before your stained glass Black Mirror altar? 100 or couple hundred times, like the average smartphone user in this country, which is pretty much everybody nowadays. And finally, the last chapter before I get to how I would propose to reform all of this, in the last 100 or so pages of the book, I do that. But is a chapter about the tech apocalypse, because unlike some religions that I could mention, it occurs to me that this one might just have the power and the inclination in our lifetimes to actually cause an apocalypse. I mean, if you look at what happened this year already in Los Angeles, in my mind, that's a climate disaster. That's a climate micro apocalypse. That is our absolute unwillingness to get unhooked, to climb down from our addiction to fossil fuel technologies, beginning to destroy us, starting with one of the iconic cities of our world. And in fact, largely because of AI, which is an incredibly electricity and water intensive technology, carbon emissions the past couple of years have actually been going up around the world. Like, with everything that we know about why we need to reduce carbon emissions in order to fight climate change, carbon emissions are going up thanks to AI. I mean, it's really sort of mind-boggling to me, and it's quite theological to me, and I'll be happy to justify that statement in a moment if you'd like me to. But it's quite theological, why these things continue to happen, and yeah, it's so I'm deeply concerned that we can continue to battle traditional religion. And in fact, there are many traditional religious institutions that give us every reason to battle them. Project 2025, just for one incredibly powerful example. But there are times now when battling certain religions almost begins to feel like punching down to me, when in fact the institutions that possess trillions of dollars are the ones that we should be punching up at. And to the extent that religion is not punching down, it's still punching up, the kinds of religions that I think we still want to punch up at, meaning going after things that are quite powerful and more powerful than us, and that requires our courage to do. They're increasingly in league with tech power. Like, it boggled my mind, and it even boggled Jared Huffman's mind. I was talking to Jared Huffman, our humanist atheist congressperson, several weeks ago before my book came out. and he was the national chair of the congressional effort to fight Project 2025. Unsuccessful effort at this point. Maybe will be more successful going forward. Um, and I said you might want to look into the fact that uh, tech is a big part of Project 2025. And he said, no, Project 2025, that's a Heritage Foundation thing. That's not a tech thing. Tech is off in this other department, other league, doing other kinds of things. And I did some research on it and found that, in fact, crypto, Bitcoin money was huge, multi-millions of dollars, huge for Project 2025. And Elon Musk is now out there working with German far right parties and other Christian. He's declaring himself, although he's been a lifelong public atheist, to be culturally Christian and experimenting with Christianity, as has Peter Thiel for quite some time now. Because the most powerful forms of conservative religion and the most powerful forms of tech are increasingly realizing they need each other. They need one another's symbolic power and financial power to push back against people like us. So that's where I'll leave this, and look forward to see what kinds of thoughts this has stimulated and what we should talk about for our second half hour here. Thank you very much, though, for having me. And I would enjoy if people want to turn their camera on, if that's okay, and give me a comment or two. I mean, it's not often that I get a chance to interact with you, so I don't want to be, some sort of, far away figure that you have to like, politely type a question to. Just talk to me if you want. Sean, you're muted, I believe.
Great. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you. So the way this webinar works is we'll have folks raise their hand since Greg would like to, speak to y'all one-on-one rather than, using me as some sort of interface. That's perfectly fine with me. So what I'll have you do is go ahead and raise your hand. And as your hand raises, I'll go ahead and change the features to allow you to interact with Greg, okay? Looks like I have one hand up now. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Ash from San Francisco, and I was born in a Hindu family, very religious, went to a Catholic mission school, was surrounded by Islamic communities. So everywhere, religion, religion, religion.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in my mid-teens, I thought this is all nonsense, and I became a humanist. And since the internet in the 1990s, I was very confident that this will change the world in a way that it will draw us, the whole global population, away from religion and into science. What I have seen in practice is quite the opposite. When I post something on humanist lines, there are trolls which discourage me.
Mm-hmm.
They come with very mean comments which put me off to the point that I'm no longer on Facebook, on any kind of social media. And what I see is it's the fundamentalist of various religions who are dominating the internet. And they are the ones who jump on the technology and they make the most use of it and spread their word.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking that technology will change the world and most of the human population will go on humanist lines. The results I am seeing are quite the opposite.
Yeah.
What can we do as humanists to change this?
Yeah, thank you, Ash. It's good to talk to you, and good judgment for you for at least worrying about the social media tech. By the way, I'm not saying that um, that social media tech is irredeemable or is all bad, because I think that there are strengths to these technologies, but I would say that um, the sort of naive belief that they are going to make our world perfect by spreading only good information is not useful. It can make the problems worse, because then we place false confidence in these technologies. We identify them with them. We use them for our community building, for our human connection, for our sharing of information. And at the very least, what that does is it dulls our ability to do the really hard, incredibly important work of actually connecting with one another as human beings offline. Because that's really hard work, and it's the most rewarding kind of work that we can do, to build relationships with one another that are strong enough to give us a real sense of joy and pleasure in life, to feel connected with one another, and that can empower us to make positive change on the ground. That there's this myth that, because there are positive stories to be found in things like the Arab Spring, that social media can accomplish anything, and it can't. It just can't. And so it can do some good things, but when we become over reliant on it, we see the bad actors on it that are supercharged, at least to the same extent that we are, and perhaps even more so, because unlike people like, I think, you and I, they're willing to inject an enormous amount of fake and false and deliberately inhumane information into the dialogue. And so, as certain kinds of people always have been, but this technology supercharges them at least as much as it might supercharge anything that you or I want to do, if not more so. So, yeah, I would just say that we can continue to use this tech. I'm happy to be on a Zoom webinar with you right now. And if I get some fun thought later, I might post it on social media just like anybody. But we've got to increase our ability to connect with one another in real life. We've got to improve our relationship skills and make what we call humanism or secularism, if not congregationally oriented, because I used to believe that should be the way, and I no longer do. But I think it's got to be in some ways more community oriented, certainly more relationship oriented, more inspiring. When I sign copies of Tech Agnostic, I'll draw a little stick figure Sisyphus, the character from the Myth of Sisyphus, which is an essay by the Nobel Prize winning philosopher Albert Camus, who was a humanist atheist like us, and who wrote of this mythological character Sisyphus, who pushes his boulder up a hill and is condemned to do that forever. The boulder goes up to the top, it rolls down, and he has to keep pushing it forever. Camus wrote, the struggle itself is enough to make a person happy, enough to bring a person joy. That struggle of pushing our rock, and pushing a rock, it's sort of like doing the dishes or doing the laundry. Like, no matter what you try to do in life, as soon as you're done doing it, you just have to do it again. With anything meaningful in life, it is that way. And one of my students, an older student named Nina Litton, who studied to be a humanist chaplain under me and is now a chaplain at MIT, once said to me that, Greg, if Sisyphus is pushing the rock, but he's pushing it alone, then I'm not sure I buy Camus' thesis that it's enough, that doing that is enough to bring a person joy. If you want to tell me that Sisyphus is doing this together along with other Sisyphuses from diverse backgrounds, and that they're helping one another, that they're either pushing the same rock or they're pushing in parallel, looking over at one another, drawing inspiration from one another, she said, then fine, then I'll believe it. But not if it's alone. And so, whether it's some use of tech, but also some use of not tech, or whatever the combination is, whatever the formula is, we got to get better at helping each other push.
Yeah, in my real life, person to person, face to face, I find common ground and get into good conversations, and people are pretty receptive that way. We have some ground rules, but on the internet, it's a different story. People are anonymous. We don't know each other face to face, and
Yep.
they are free to say whatever. And
Yep.
the meanness
Don't read the
of
comments,
it,
Ash. Yep.
right? Exactly. Thanks, Mr. Epstein.
Yeah,
Appreciate your comment.
Mm-hmm. What
I
else?
have a question in the chat box from Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Rebecca so that you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah.
Rebecca, go ahead and unmute.
Mute. Okay, can you get me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I recently read a book by Elliot Ackerman, who's a wonderful author, called 2034, where he creates a very what I think is a very plausible scenario of a limited nuclear war. That if there can be such a thing, that was based on one government misusing and overusing AI to basically, invade another country and take over the infrastructure of another country, including the military.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was a cautionary tale. I just was wondering if you have any comments on that.
I do. I mean, I won't comment on the specific book. I haven't read the specific book, but I've read a lot of sort of AI criticism these past several years, including with similar ideas. And I'll just say this: AI is being sold to us these days as a kind of messianic enterprise. It's that there are prominent people who are essentially telling us that AI should be put into use in almost every scenario, almost every place, almost every human undertaking. I looked down at my phone this morning as just one of a billion examples and saw, I went to just see what the weather was going to be. And the app says, do you want to click, it asks you to click on the AI weather report. Like AI weather, because, clicking to see what the temperature is going to be today, tomorrow, and the next 10 days is not AI enough, right? Now we have to even AIify that. There's no endeavor that we can't AIify, right? And, Sam Altman, a pretty secular individual, the founder, CEO, or co-founder, CEO of OpenAI, going around right now, I think of it as hat in hand, like, please, won't you? He's recruiting $5 to $7 trillion in what he hopes will be immediate investment to build data centers. At least 500 billion of which, Trump and the Trump administration have already agreed to build, sort of pissing off Elon Musk, but that's I digress. That's just last week. But anyway, he's asking for $5 to $7 trillion of immediate investment to build data centers that suck up enormous amounts of water that have caused major droughts in entire regions near, like, for example, near Mexico City. Again, just in the past year, that have caused global carbon emissions to rise. But they're asking for these $5 to $7 trillion in order to essentially make AI too big to fail. To put it in so many different places that we have no choice but to obey. And so, for example, you get Reid Hoffman, who's the multi-billionaire founder of LinkedIn, who just this past week, by the way, he was on. He had Bill Gates on his podcast a few weeks ago, and Bill Gates said to Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, haha moment between billionaires. Gates said, yeah, I think AI really is becoming a new form of religion, a new form of spirituality. So, but anyway, Reid Hoffman then says on his own podcast just this past week that AI is going to have to crash everyone's wages in order to. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of a different Reid Hoffman statement from recently. Right now, I'm talking about Mark Andreessen, a balder tech billionaire than Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman has great hair. Mark Andreessen is a multi-billionaire who has kind of an egg-shaped head, much as I appear to have on this Zoom, and who is a multi-billionaire, having helped to found a number of companies from Netscape, which most of you guys wouldn't even remember, on down. And Mark Andreessen says, we're going to have to crash everybody's wages in order to bring about the new AI utopia that we're all going to ultimately benefit from. You can see the exact quote, and I reskeeted my friend Chris Hypervisible Gilliard yesterday, Blue Sky, skeeting it about it, if you want to see the exact language from Andreessen. But Andreessen is this tech billionaire who put out a document a couple of years ago called the Techno Optimists Manifesto, in which he uses the term "we believe" exactly 133 times in the literary form that you could only describe as an epistle, arguing essentially that that AI is so necessary to our world that anybody who impedes the rapid development of AI to the tune of this, trillions of dollars, should be seen as committing, quote, a form of murder, unquote. So, if you slow down, according to these tech bros, these broligarchs, as has been said, if you slow down the rapid development of their trillions of dollars of AI that are supposed to sort of enmesh us all, bring down all of our wages in order to bring about utopia later. Now, where have you heard that before, right? The idea of like, okay, we're going to make the world worse now, but then you're going to get to what? Heaven, right? There's direct parallels between the way that these broligarchs talk about their AI and the way that preachers in old-timey Christianity or Hinduism or certain forms of Buddhism, the most popular form of Buddhism in the world is Pure Land Buddhism, which does have heavens and hells and oppression in it. It's not just like perfect, wonderful Western Buddhism. Orthodox Judaism, whatever. It's each of those traditions that I just mentioned, Islam, they all have a heaven and a hell. And what AI has is it has this, like, we're going to take you to the perfect heaven. And if you read chapter 2 of my book, I show it to you in excruciating detail how they sketch it out. Or we're going to, if you don't do things our way, humanity will go to an excruciating fire and brimstone kind of hell where we'll all be extinct within 100 years. All of us. They say the Nobel laureate Geoffrey Hinton who just won the Nobel Prize this past year, 2024, in physics, despite the fact that he's not a physicist. Because he's an AI scientist, they gave him the Nobel laureate in physics anyway, just for shits and giggles, I guess. Just said recently, he's called an AI doomer, and he just said that the number that I chronicle in Tech Agnostic in chapter 2, it's called P-Doom, the chance that AI will wipe out every single human life within this century, which is listed by the sort of cross-section of AI scientists and AI leaders at 10%. And I paid to reproduce a chart in my book that, that reflects that number. Jeffrey Hinton just a few weeks ago said publicly, we should up that number from 10 to 20%. Like, how does he decide that? I don't know. What scientific studies did he run, to earn him the Nobel Prize that, that he now knows exactly that it's not 10%, it's 20%? I don't know. But he just said that, and he's part of a school of thought that is essentially preaching a kind of hell. That's saying, if you don't follow my way of engaging with the AI, you'll go to hell. So you'd better follow my way. Give me the prizes, give me the billions, give me the trillions if necessary, but follow my way. And I think what the world needs is people like us to be skeptical of that kind of language, that kind of approach, to call bullshit, and to say, hey, we're the kinds of people where if a theologian, a preacher, got up in front of us on their pulpit and said, I'll show you the way to heaven, and I'll show you the way to hell if you don't follow me. We would call bullshit. We would say, no, that's not acceptable. You're entitled to believe that privately if you wish, but we can't run the society based on it. We're going to fight back. We're going to show that there's a better way to live, a more humanistic, secular, constitutional, democratic way of life. I think those of us who believe that about traditional religion are desperately needed to mobilize one another, to mobilize ourselves in response to this emerging form of broligarchy that we're all in some ways subject to now. Because I guarantee you, Donald Trump stands a much worse chance of winning that election if he doesn't have people like Elon Musk, our prophet in chief, bankrolling him to the tune of $270 million over those last few months of the election. Why did Musk do that? He's not stupid. I don't think he's nearly the genius he thinks he is, but he's not stupid. He did it for the world's largest tax break ever in history, which he's now in the process of receiving. He did it because his net worth doubled since Joe Biden dropped out. Elon Musk was worth in the 200 billions several months ago. He's now worth into the 400 billions. He's well on track to become the world's first trillionaire during the Trump administration. And he understands that if we're mesmerized by this AI future, by this technological future where everything is seen to be unlimited possibility, but in fact what you have is a wedge driven between the haves and the have-nots, that a hierarchical system like you've never seen in any religion before, then people like him stand to benefit enormously.
Yeah, it's certainly cause for growing concern. I was actually having a conversation with AI about some of these about some of this content, and I was going back and forth with the AI model until I eventually just said, "Give me a straight yes or no. Are you ultimately good for humanity?" And it answered no. Said no.
Yeah.
Yeah, but blatantly said no. Okay, thank you so much for that question. It looks like we are approaching time, but we have a couple more questions here.
Sure,
Greg, just to kind of do a time check with you, how much time do you have? I'm happy to be here.
I'll stay on a couple minutes after 6, and then I gotta go make dinner for the kids.
Okay, sounds good. So we will go over to, is it Syriac? Is that correct? I'm wondering how technology figures into the arc of evolution. So I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk and phrase your question to Greg.
Yeah, like really interesting conversation, and totally agree with the oligarchy taking over and all that. But I mean, I'm also like a contrarian view is that we feel that humans as a species is something that is special. I mean, on this planet itself, we're just one of the species that showed up here in 4 billion years. Someday our reign is going to end. Who knows which one? The dinosaurs felt they were special too.
Yeah.
And like when you look at it, that we are in an insignificant planet on an insignificant solar system on the corner of a totally insignificant galaxy in some weird corner of the solar system, of the universe.
Yep.
What's special about humans that it deserves preservation, except that this viewpoint is a humanist ego viewpoint, that there's something special about us to be saved. And if we look at it from the arc of evolution, I don't know if you read Ray Kurzweil's Age of the Spiritual Machines, and how the acceleration of events in the world are happening. For sure, we are coming to a point where the acceleration is so quick. Like if we think of AI, it was like, I mean, it's been around for a while, but it really broke into mass recognition with ChatGPT, and that was maybe like 1.5 years or 2 years ago. And today, DeepSeek came just like 4 days ago, and it's already everywhere. And now the tech bros are sweating, and their days are over.
Yeah,
and, when you look at change is like a constant that is happening every day. And for us to say that we resist that change is perhaps you're fighting greater forces than even like corporations and oligarchs. Like change is woven into the existence, the fabric of existence. And what should we do, therefore, knowing that change is coming? What is that change that we want? Rather than a blind opposition to it.
Let me answer you, so that we got a little time for one last one.
Yeah.
I mean, well said in many ways. I'll say this though: in many ways you were quoting Carl Sagan. We're on one little pale blue dot in the universe, in a not so special sector of the universe, but Sagan and his wife Andrian, who helped to set the poetry of the language, wrote, "For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love." And I think that that's as important a quote to memorize as any secular humanist, atheist, agnostic person could have. For small creatures such as we, Syriac and others, the vastness is bearable only through love. And whether or not the dinosaurs were conscious of the asteroid, I'm not sure that their brains were as developed as ours are to love. And so, what I would say is, and I write quite a bit, actually. You asked about Ray Kurzweil, who is prophesizing a kind of secular rapture coming soon, where we're going to also essentially be uploaded into the machine. He says within a decade from now, right? It's a kind of end times that he's predicting. And I spoke to him about this recently, and I said to him, Mr. Kurzweil, about this line that you have in your book, "The Singularity is Near," where you say that we're going to end death as we know it. Where have you heard that before, right? That's Christian theology, right? We're going to end death as we know it. But by the way, ending death is not just Christian theology. It's also in Jewish theology, Hindu theology, Buddhist theology, just more popularly known in certain circles in Christian theology. Making life meaningful. And I said to him, don't you think that flies in the face of few thousand years of secular philosophy, not to even mention religious philosophy, where, secular and religious thinkers alike, kind of think life's already been meaningful? And he looks at me and he says, well, maybe life's been somewhat meaningful up until now. But, the implication is they're going to make it ever more meaningful, right? And so what I would say is, and again, please read the book. I'm not getting into any of the depth here, but I would say this: we can envision an AI future, and sort of slavishly devote ourselves to it right now at the expense of the here and now. But I thought humanists and secular people are supposed to be here and now people, right? We're the people that are like, don't tell us about your perfect world in the future. We want justice now. We want compassion now. We want reason now. Don't tell me about reason, paradise, and heaven. Tell me why we can't have more reason now. Tell me why we can't have more equity now. Tell me why we can't have more enjoyment of the human condition now. And so we can spend all our time trying to put the AI into the future. But if we're jerks to one another now, we're just going to create AI jerks in the future. Whereas if we actually work on improving our relationships with one another now and improving our society now such that society is not full of a bunch of jerks, then maybe down the road a ways, we might actually create artificial intelligences that aren't jerks because they'll actually be made in our better image. That's the kind of attitude, the mentality that I would want us humanists to take with us into the future. Like, are we just one species among many? Sure. But in the meantime, we have the ability to love. Do we not? I think we do. I will challenge anybody who says, no, we don't actually have an ability to love. Love is not a religious concept. It's a secular concept too. We need to get better at it. I'll take one more. And then I'll look forward to seeing y'all in other contexts. Please feel free to find me on social media, LinkedIn and Blue Sky these days, because I got off of the Elon machine a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and flip over to another question. While I do that, Greg, I wanted to drop a link to your book for purchase. Do you have a link that you prefer? Is it the MIT link?
Yeah, you can, the MIT link, there's a Penguin Random House link, I won't dock you points if you buy it on Amazon, whatever you need to do, buy it wherever you would like to buy books.
Cool. So I'm going to go over to one more question from, I believe, Faisal. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now, Faisal, and allow you to talk and give us your question. You can go ahead and unmute in the bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he needs to move to a safe country right now. Maybe he's ducking the authorities in his country right at this moment.
Yeah, so it looks like the question we got in the chat box is, technology has become the most powerful religion in the world and in most aspects of our lives. Our daily lives have been completely dependent on versatile technology, such as social media apps, which have become a major influence on trends and change a lot of concepts. We spend more time with technology in these apps than we do with our human peers.
He's inclined to agree, I think. And what I would just say is, not every person that affiliates themselves with the Secular Student Alliance will like the term humanist for themselves. I get that. I've never been one to ask everybody to call themselves a humanist. This book, I'd say, argues for humanism as a useful term to call ourselves by, but it never states, and I never would state, that we all should call ourselves humanists. There's no pope somebody once said, like, I try to be like the humanist pope, and I just thought that was so funny. That was so funny. But there's no pope to say, you guys call yourselves atheists and you guys call yourselves agnostics and free thinkers, secular, although there was a wonderful 2-part episode of the show South Park that was about just that. It was about the great question, and there are these warring armies 500 years in the future, and they're all warring, it turns out, over what atheists should call themselves. And if you ever want like 45 minutes to an hour of incredible humanist, secularist, atheist content, just watch those 2 episodes together. But anyway, at least this, we can put the human in humanism or in the world. Like, we are pro-human. We're not saying that we have irrational faith in humans. We're not saying that we think humans are perfect all the time. No. To the extent that there's evidence to the contrary, we'll go with the evidence. But what we are saying is we want the best for humans. And we recognize that we are only human, meaning that we know we're going to die one day, and we should be the people who are comfortable with that. We know that we're not perfect, that we don't know everything. We should be the people who are comfortable with that. We're not running around terrified of our mortality to the point where we try to, steal other people's blood in order to extend our own lives, which is a thing that some tech people do. It's called parabiosis. You saw it on the Silicon Valley HBO show, where the tech billionaire is like literally injecting himself with a young person's blood. But whatever. Anyway, the point is, those of us who identify with this secular, humanist, atheist, agnostic, etc., free-thinking cause, we need to get better at fighting for humans and for humanity, and own the fact that that is something that we care deeply about. We're going to find, if we do so, that, one, we're going to have a number of religious allies, because there will be liberal Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, etc., who will say, yes, I'm like that too. And they'll also appreciate our leadership. And so we'll become one of the more significant constituencies in the world of religious and non-religious people who are fighting for humanity. They're going to appreciate our language, our rhetoric, because, they're coming up with theological rhetoric to justify being pro-human. We don't have to do that. We just say, hey, we're pro-human. We're pro-human because we choose to be, not because God tells us to be. We just are. And so it's something where we can take this on. We can take this cause on, whether it's against big tech or big conservative religion, or especially against the combination of both. And we can be some of the leading voices in the world for a pro-human agenda. That's what I'd like to work on with groups like this. And I look forward to seeing you around as we do so.